The False Doctrine of Hell and the Reconciliation of All Things, Part 1. Welcome to Legends on the Map. I'm your host, William Kennedy. Thanks for stopping by. Today, we're going to get into the False Doctrine of Hell and the Reconciliation of All Things, Part 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to start at the beginning in Genesis, and we're going to look at the sin of Adam and Eve. We're going to look at Cain and Abel, and we're going to look at Genesis 6 and the flood and what happened after the flood when Noah and his family came off of the boat. And I'm going to read through these different scriptures so that we can start to build a foundation on what I call the false doctrine of hell. And we're going to look at these occurrences that happen in the scripture and see the consequences for that. And then we'll talk about that as I'm walking through it and then afterwards. But the idea here is to build a foundation on evidence that we have within the Bible itself. And then eventually we're going to get into breaking down definitions of words that have been associated to or referenced to the word hell, like Gehenna, Tartarus, Hades, and Sheol, and see how this theology has been placed in the scripture and on the minds of readers by well-crafted deceivers. So thanks for stopping by. And if this is something that's been on your list of things that are bothering you for any various number of different reasons, I'm hoping that this will give you a little bit of calm in the storm. And if you watch the introductory video on the 17 different Bible versions that were listed in that, and how many times the word hell is actually or not actually listed in some of those, and seeing the great difference between all of those. And it should be a really shocking thing to see that the experts can't even agree upon themselves as far as how many times the word hell should appear in the scripture. So let's start in this, and we're just going to break it down. And I got to walk through this slow so that we can start to build that, once again, that foundation. And remember, 2 Timothy 3:16 through 17 says that we are to test all things. Scripture is for proof and for reproof, so that we can become well equipped in the word of Elohim. And Jeremiah 16:19 says that everything that we inherited from our forefathers were lies. And those are the traditions of men. And these are things that we need to be very aware of. And we need to be willing to question these things, including our own doctrinal theology. So let's get started, okay? Okay, we're going to open with a quote from a book entitled The Origin and History of the Doctrine of Endless Punishment, written by Thomas B. Thayer, circa 1855. And he says, this little work is written for the purpose of furnishing a sketch of the argument by which it is shown that the doctrine of endless punishment is not of divine origin, but traceable directly to a heathen source. It is not intended as an elaborately philosophical or critical discussion of the subject, as the size of the volume will show, but only as a popular presentation of the method of proof and of the leading facts and authorities on which the argument rests. The following two positions will be admitted without question, and it is believed by all professing Christians. First, if the doctrine of endless punishment be, as affirmed by its believers, absolutely and indispensably necessary to the preservation of virtue and to the perfect obedience to the laws of Elohim, if this be the salutary and saving influence of the doctrine, then it constitutes one of the strongest possible reasons for its being revealed to man at the very earliest period of the world's history. Second, if endless punishment be true, it is terribly true to all those who are in danger, wherein is found another powerful reason why it should have been made known in the clearest manner or on the very morning of creation. In the clearest manner, it should not have been left in doubt or obscurity by the use of indefinite terms, but it should have been proclaimed in language which no man could misunderstand if he would. Rather than that, there should even be the possibility of a mistake in a matter of such vast and fearful moment. It should have been graven by special miracle into every soul that Elohim sent into the world. That's a really great statement that he makes right here. And you don't see anything like that whatsoever in the scripture. There is no teaching from the Father on the do's and the don'ts of what he wanted for us to understand and how to develop as new creatures created in his environment. So let's start taking a look at these. Sin and the punishment in the temporal realm through cause and effect. In Genesis 2:16 through 17. And Elohim commanded the man, saying, Eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for in that day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. There's the warning. Genesis 3:1 through 7. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field, which Elohim has made. And he said to the Asha, to the woman, It is true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree of the garden. And the Asha said to the serpent, We are to eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, Do not eat of it or touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the Asha, You shall surely not die, for Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to make one wise. And she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loin covering for themselves. And sin creeps in to all of humanity at that point. This is the consequence of sin and the punishment in the temporal realm, the first human sin. Genesis 3:11 through 20. And he said, Who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And Elohim said to the woman, What is this that you have done? And the woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. And Elohim said to the serpent, Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the livestock, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly are you to go, and eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and between the Asha, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. And to the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain. And your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, Because you have listened to the voice of your Asha, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, Do not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat of the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to the dust you return. And the man called his Asha's name Kua, because she became the mother of all living. So he says you're to eat bread until you return to the ground. Obviously, they were vegetarians at this particular stage of human development. Let's go on. Genesis 3:21 through 24. And Elohim made coats of skin for the man and his Asha and dressed them. And Elohim said, See, the man has become one discerning to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. And he drove the man out. And he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Murder and the second human sin. Genesis 4:4 through 16. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Elohim looked to Abel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering. And Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Elohim said to Cain, why are you wroth? Why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. And Cain told Abel his brother. And it came to be when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And Elohim said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's guardian? He's got some attitude going on right there with the king, and that's probably not a good thing either. But one of the things that I do want to touch on here is it says, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. He's talking about something that has been spoken on quite often in the Christian theology, but it's not given the weight that I think that it should have, and that is our state of mind. This is what this is all about. As we move through this, you're going to start to see exactly what hell really is, and it's associated, just like heaven is, to the state of mind that we are existing in or choose to exist in, or let's maybe look at it another way, the way that they have chosen for us to exist in. Okay. Social media, everything that's going on in the world, it's the world they choose for you to exist in. And once you recognize that and decide you're going to start coming out, then you start breaking free of the matrix. Okay. Murder in the first degree. And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the Eretz, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And if you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive and wander on the Eretz. And Cain said to Elohim, my punishment is too great to bear. See, you have driven me out from the face of the ground today, and I am hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the Eretz. And it shall be that anyone who finds me shall kill me. And Elohim said to him, well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taken on him sevenfold. And Elohim set up a sign for Cain, lest anyone finding him kills him. So Cain went out from the presence of Elohim and dwelt in the land of Nob on the east of Eden. And there's a lot going on in here, but we're not going to unpack that. This is about looking at the cause and effect of the actions of what they're actually doing here and where this doctrine of hell comes from. Okay. One thing of curious note, perhaps, in the account of the first human sin, which occurred in the Garden of Eden, containing multiple violations of the Ten Commandments, by the way, which are not mentioned in Genesis 1 or Genesis 2. Okay, but there's not a word or syllable mentioned in regard to the consequence of eternal torture or torment when their sentence is handed down by Elohim for this temporal life that they live in and you and I live in, or afterwards in the eternal realm. The second human sin, murder in the first degree, a most heinous crime, certainly a crime noteworthy of mention in regard to the idea of eternal torture and torment for all eternity, but Elohim is completely silent in regard to the eternal consequence for sin, both in the temporal and in the heavenly realms. Not a single word or syllable is mentioned once again. That's a very curious note. Where's the teacher? Where's when humanity was born, we didn't come with an instruction manual, and you may have already recognized that with the things that have gone on in your own life, that maybe we weren't taught quite well enough, and we've gone through that learning phase that's trial and error, and we get knocked down, but we get back up and we keep going, and we learn as we go, and none of this was given to us. None of this information at all was given to us. But then when they did start to give it to us, this was scripted, guys. This was not from the King of Kings. Okay. Once again, we're talking about state of mind and where we're walking in. Could all this have been just a terrible mistake? Could the Father of all creation simply have forgot to mention something of such an everlasting consequence for all of humanity? One might consider something of such magnitude that it could have perhaps deterred all of his creation from sinning ever against him. If that was something that went on right from the beginning, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. Okay. Human sin number 3, the deluge or the destruction of all things. Genesis 6, and the sins of the watchers as they came down from the Shamayim, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they've chosen. And if you would like to get a really more detailed description of what is going on here in Genesis 6, because in our quote King James Version Bible or whatever version of it you may have, it's very vague about what goes on there. But if you happen to have some of the Apocrypha books, you're going to want to look at Jasher chapter 4 verses 17 through 19. And you might want to read through the whole chapter because it's filled with a lot of information that I think you might find very interesting. And it basically explains different things about what was going on with DNA splicing and a whole bunch of other things. All right. That's again, Jasher, the book of Jasher, chapter 4, 17 through 19. Okay. We're going to pick up in verse 3. And Elohim said, my Ruach shall not strive with man forever in his going astray. He is flesh, and in his days shall be 120 years, and his days shall be 120 years. Again, a warning. Okay, verse 5 says, and Elohim saw the wickedness of man was great in the earths, and that every inclination of the thought of his heart was only evil continually. And Elohim was sorry that he had made man on the earths, and he was grieved in his heart. Genesis 6, 7. And Elohim said, I'm going to wipe off man whom I have created from the face of the earths, both man and beast, creeping creature and birds of the Shamayim, for I am sorry that I have made them. That is a stunning declaration from the creator of all things recorded in scriptures for us, guys. That is stunning that he is so grieved in his heart that he has to wipe us all out. Surely this act of complete wickedness in all of humanity is the final act that will bring about the declaration of eternal torture and torment for those who have sinned so grievously against the Most High. And then there were 8. Genesis 7, 13 through 14. On that same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's women, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his son with them went into the ark. They and every living creature after its kind, and every beast after its kind, and every creeping creature that creeps on the earths after its kind, and every bird after its kind, every bird of every sort. Verse 16, and Yahuwah shut him in. Verse 22, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of God, the creation of life. All that was on dry land died. Genesis 7, 23 through 24. So he wiped off all that stand, which were on the face of the ground, both man and beast, creeping creature and birds of the Shamayim, and they were wiped off from the earths, and only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. And the waters were mighty on the earths for 150 days. In this astonishing account of the destruction of all things, in whose nostrils was the breath of Elohim in them, all life was wiped out on land, except for Noah and his family. Then in verse 8 of Genesis, Noah and his family leave the ark on dry ground once again to start anew with Elohim. Genesis 9, 6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of Elohim he was made. And this also applied to the animals and the eating of animals with the blood still in them. That was a no-no. Okay. But yet again, not a teaching word on the possible reality of eternal torture or torment in either the temporal or eternal realms for sins against Elohim. This again would have been the most opportune time for something of such vast importance to all of his creation being shared with them, starting once again all over. But not a word. There's not a word there, guys. I've always found this kind of odd when I started to study this subject that as we move through the Old Testament, we're going to continue to see this same thing go on over and over again up until we start to see what transpires with Moses and Mount Sinai. And we're just going to continue to talk about this and be able to touch on the key points so that we can see if there's ever anything mentioned in the scripture about eternal torture and torment in the Old Testament, and be able to use that for building the foundation once again. And we have to be able to do that in order to accurately be able to put the evidence together to prove that this was a story put together by well-crafted deceivers. Okay. And why we're here and why these things have not been disclosed to us has always kept us in the dark. That's where we've been. And we're going to talk about the dark too. And I'm doing that in the other series that I'm putting out on the channel here too. Will the real God please stand up? And are there more than one God in the Bible? And how can we tell who we're looking at? And I think you're going to find that very interesting too, because once again, I'm testing the Christian theology that I was born and raised with, that most of us in Western society have come to understand, and putting a different set of glasses on it so that we can see if there's something different in there. Because once I came into the discovery that the doctrine of hell was false, and let me restate that. Once I understood that what we were told was the doctrine of hell was false, okay, I started to realize that what hell actually, or the state of mind of hell actually is. And it's a place that we can choose to either exist in or not exist in. It just depends on what you're looking at and what we understand about the true character of the Father and the Son, as opposed to what we've been led to believe by false ministers of light. Okay, so thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you sticking with me through this and walking through all of this, because like I mentioned before, if this is something that you're struggling with, because this has touched every facet of our human lives, it's I would hope that it's going to give you a little bit of peace in the storm once you come to understand what this is about and what you and I need to do to take the power of the Ruach, the spirit that Christ left for us, and being able to use that to empower ourselves to overcome the matrix that we're living in. Much peace, much love. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye-bye.